Welcome to Things I Learned in my PhD, so you don't have to do one. A series where I talk to PhDs and soon-to-bes about the things they learned in their PhD that either transform them or traumatize them. Either way, you won't have to do one. My guest today is Michaela Khan. Michaela is a fifth-year PhD candidate at the University of British Columbia in Canada in the field of kinesiology. And fun fact about Michaela, she's an avid cyclist and bike enthusiast, a passion that she says runs in her family since her grandmother was a bicycle. Michaela, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really good. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
So, tell me a bit more about your PhD experience so far, and also maybe a bit about what your PhD is in.
My PhD became quite multifaceted over the years. I would have said years ago that I started as a clinical biomechanist. So I study the forces that act upon our body or within our bodies with like a medical twist to it. It's definitely evolved. And now I would say maybe I'm a jack of all trades, but master of none. I'm using
Okay.
a lot of different tools in my PhD.
Yeah.
So I can talk about my research area if that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so you say clinical biomechanist, and as someone who's also from the kinesiology family, I kind of understand that. But then for people who may be less familiar with like what a biomechanist even is, you say forces inside and acting on. I think of like the burden of responsibility, but
Mm.
maybe maybe you can be more specific.
I guess mine are more the physical,
The physical forces, okay.
physical forces. Yeah, so those Newton's three laws, that's
Yeah.
kind of forms the foundation of my work. So I'll give you one example from my research. So if you've ever heard of like doing a gait analysis,
Yeah.
so I
Gait is
would
in
get
GAIT.
That's correct. Yes. So I get runners from the community. We have a specialized setup with these very fancy motion capture cameras. And then
Yeah.
we have also a special treadmill with four sensors embedded into it. And so we pop them up on the treadmill, turn the cameras on, and we can look at things like the angles that their joints make. As they run, you exert like force into the ground. And then by Newton's third law, every force has an equal and opposite reaction
Yeah,
force.
that's
The
right.
ground hits you back. So we can measure that too. And yeah, look at running technique overall. That would be a gait analysis.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a fair fight though. It feels like the ground's going to win pretty much every time though.
Yeah, good old gravity.
So, obviously running I feel like has been one of those things that as a millennial, you kind of like everyone kind of gets into, it's either like you get into like sourdough or running or having a kid, I guess. But with running and with the kind of widespread adoption of like running as like a recreational activity, I would say now, right? What have you noticed anything in particular about people's running form or like that people kind of are bringing up to you?
Yeah, I get questions about form a lot. And
Mhm.
truthfully, I came into a running related PhD because I wanted to like fix my own injuries very selfishly. And I truly came in and was like, okay, I'm going to look at the literature, I'm going to find the perfect technique, and then I'm going to
Yeah.
tell everybody how to run. And I quickly realized that there is no perfect technique.
Okay.
And yeah, no perfect technique, which really shocked me and kind of steered me maybe in other directions in my PhD. I definitely
Yeah.
had an existential crisis and be like, what? I can't save the world with this like perfect running technique.
Better switch to
Um,
cycling.
yeah, so this is, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just forget running.
Yeah, forget this running thing. Um, so yeah, there is no perfect running technique. There are ways to change your running technique, but
Yeah.
essentially there's not a lot of ways that we can take load or impact away from the body. We just move it somewhere else. So
Right.
we could move it somewhere else to protect a certain area of the body, but
Yeah.
then you're putting stress on another place which might not be as well adapted. So you
Right.
have to be very, very careful when you're changing anything.
Right. I mean, certainly it seems it's a bit like conservation of mass in a way, right? Like the force has to exist. It just can't disappear into nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that makes a lot of sense, like depending on, I guess, the kind of anatomy you have and a lot of other sort of factors that your running form would be different for a lot of different people. Like I know, for
Yeah.
example, there was the hot debate, and maybe you can inform a little bit of this with the heel strike versus soul strike thing. Is there anything clearer on that? Just like which is better? No? Okay.
No, I mean, no, there is not really a more, there's some research that shows that running on your toes is a little bit more efficient, maybe.
Yeah.
But again, with that, we're taking something from somewhere and changing it somewhere else. When you change from a heel strike to a forefoot strike, you're taking load away from the knee, but you're
Right.
putting it on the foot, the Achilles tendon, the calf. And if
Okay.
those structures aren't strong enough to tolerate that switch in load, you're going to get Achilles tendonitis, plantar fasciitis. You can, yeah, strain your calf. So, foot strike is a very, very dangerous one to me. And if you're going to
Okay.
do it, you have to do it very, very slowly with an associated strength training
Okay.
protocol.
Okay. Fair enough. That makes sense. I want to
Mhm.
touch back on something you said earlier, where you said you started out as being a clinical biomechanist, and now you consider yourself more of a jack of all trades, master of none. What do you mean by that?
So I, again, came into my PhD. I was like, I'm a biomechanist. I do physics. I do math. Turns out I'm not especially brilliant at any of those things.
I don't believe that.
I do okay, but I'm not like a pure biomechanist. And
Yeah.
so I, up until my third year of my PhD, like I had proposed, I think, three studies solely based on biomechanics, really. And I started to work with our participants, our patients, and I'm seeing the numbers on the screen and I'm hearing their stories, and they're just not really aligning. Like the numbers weren't telling the full stories. And they gave such rich accounts of how running is important in their life or changed their life. And I just felt like that wasn't being captured at all.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, how do we capture that? And the answer was qualitative research, which I had
Oh,
never
you
done.
pivoted to qualitative. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. And
You
so
joined
in
the dark side.
yeah, I
Not the dark
know, I know.
side.
And so literally the first semester of my fourth year in my PhD, I sat with all the master students, first year master students in a qualitative class.
Yeah.
And every week the professor was just blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and that completely changed the trajectory of what I wanted to do and what I think of myself as a researcher.
How did your supervisor, because obviously coming into this and originally proposing three very clinical biomechanist, physics related, you said, sort of studies, now moving to qualitative, how were they receptive to that?
They were receptive, which I'm very, very grateful for. I'm really lucky to have a really wonderful supervisor.
Yeah.
But he is a clinical biomechanist, so had no real experience. None of his students had done qualitative research before. So I really
Mhm.
relied on the help of, like, we brought someone else onto my supervisory committee, who's been just fabulous helping me along and tells me to not take things so seriously because as quantitative researchers, sometimes we get really in the weeds of things. And he's like, it doesn't matter. I'm like, what do you mean it doesn't
They're
matter?
numbers. It's proof.
Yeah, there's all his comments and my things, and it's like, don't think too hard about this. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, he was very supportive, but we did have to seek help from others.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
for those that maybe haven't done a PhD or are less familiar with it, switching paradigms, really, switching the entire way that you think about doing research and collecting data and then analyzing that data from quantitative to qualitative, it's no small feat, right? People go into one or two of the others, and it's takes a lot of time and I think a lot of cognitive flexibility to be able to switch to the other. So, fifth year PhD now, light at the end of the tunnel, having now switched your paradigm.
I think so. I am thankful to be done my data collection now, and
Yeah.
I feel happy with the product. I don't think I would have felt as fulfilled if I stuck to my original plan. And so I feel good going into the writing phase. It's definitely, again, taking a lot longer than I thought it would, and I'm
Yeah.
constantly still learning new things.
Of course.
But it feels a lot more fulfilling now.
Yeah.
I'm glad I made the
Absolutely.
switch. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, you want to be able to leave your PhD, I think, and say, I didn't just do this particular field and become an expert in this particular field, but also that I have these skills and I have the ability to then conduct the research I want to be doing. right? Because ultimately, I think that's
Exactly.
what you're doing. You're becoming a researcher, a learner of all things, right? You're interested in.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So then now seeing the end of the tunnel and having had, I think, kind of a cool pivotal moment in your PhD where you're like, I want to do something different. I think there's something more interesting here. It must have been difficult. Tell me about the lesson you learned in your PhD.
Yes, my lessons, I guess, really center around help. Looking for help, asking for help, and hopefully eventually giving help as
Okay.
well.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
as I'm making these transitions, like again, I'm sitting in that class, my mind is being blown, and I realize, gosh, I'm gonna need a lot of help with this. This is something I can try and do a bit on my own. I, for the first time, can't look directly at my supervisor for help because this is not his area of expertise.
Yeah.
So where else can I get that help? Who can I ask? What resources do I need? So that's kind of the academic side of asking for
Yeah.
help.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so you say asking for help, receiving help, and then hopefully eventually returning the favor, right? When you say asking for help, I imagine you being in that qualitative classroom with all sort of the first year master's students and just like wide-eyed writing notes and then at a certain point being like, I don't even know what to write anymore. How did you leave that class and kind of recognize that like, oh man, I think I'm gonna need someone to kind of walk me through this beyond simply just taking the class?
That's a good question. I think it's because I didn't know where to go next. Like I felt pretty decently equipped with the skills I learned in that class, but
Yeah.
then going on to form my own research question and I remember just being like every step of the way, I was like, is this allowed? Am I doing this right?
The rules
Can I
of
say
research. Qualitative is
this?
like, there's no rules.
Which coming from a quantitative background and moving into qualitative, that was really shocking because there are so many rules. In
Yeah.
quantitative, there's rules that every sentence you write, there's a rule about it.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm now learning and still learning in qualitative, um, it's such a different way of researching. And I remember I proposed this research study and somebody goes, well, isn't this biased? And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, that's not okay. I'm like, but it's
That's the point.
qualitative. Yes.
Yeah, I
And
recently
yeah.
started doing in my own work a little bit of constructivist qualitative research.
Mm.
And so, obviously the idea coming into it that like we as people cannot remove our humanness from the question we ask, from the way that we interpret the data that's coming in, from how we're observing even, and then ultimately even the question and the way we analyze the data. It derives from us being like making these connections in our brain, and there is that reflexivity to it, where you kind of have to recognize like, hey, I'm only human, right? I have my own knowledge and preconceptions. And so I'm sure that you have that same reflexivity in your own work, but maybe I'd like to dig a little bit about like, tell me about what was your reflexivity within your own research?
Yeah, so I do running research. I've been a recreational runner for a long time. I
Uh-huh.
specifically work with older runners who I guess over 40 is not really old, but over runners over 40.
I
I
have
have to
that to
be
look forward to, I guess. Being an older
um
person.
masters runners, which can be
Oh,
whatever age
stop.
you want it to be. And for my master's, I worked in a lab that was centered around osteoarthritis, but I said I would never, ever, ever do research on people with osteoarthritis because in my mind,
It seems like
the
such a strange
idea
line to form.
I know, but only because like I had this preconceived notion that osteoarthritis was so degenerative. I was scared of my own joints degenerating. Um, I was just really freaked out by the idea.
Oh, wow.
So when this PhD position came up, it was like running research, check. I get to work with medical imaging, check. I get to work with like in a cool biomechanics lab, check. And then they were like, it's on older runners with knee osteoarthritis. And I was like, no.
So
And
close.
yeah, so close, so close. But I was convinced to work with this population and it ended up being one of the best decisions I could have ever made, by my supervisor who was telling me, hey, there are people with osteoarthritis who run. And I was like, what? Like, I worked with people who could barely walk. Like, you can't tell me that these people are running. But sure enough, we had no problems recruiting runners with knee osteoarthritis. And I mean, our oldest participant was 81 years old and still running 25 kilometers a week. So all
Wow.
these preconceived ideas I had about, you're going to wear away your knees, like your running career stops after a certain age. Like I was so wrong.
Yeah.
And these participants truly inspired me. And while I'm not personally a older runner with knee osteoarthritis, so I can't put myself in their shoes,
Not
I've just
yet.
been not
I'm not
yet, not
kidding,
yet,
kidding, I'm kidding.
probably, which now I know that osteoarthritis is not a wear and tear disease as we once thought. It's just a normal
Oh,
part of aging.
okay.
I know.
Okay.
Didn't know that before my PhD.
Fair enough.
Um, it's completely changed my mind about what it's like to grow older and keep active and keep exercising.
Yeah.
So that was a really big point of reckoning for me. So I bring that into my work that I was totally wrong at the beginning, and
Yeah.
they've changed my life for sure.
Yeah. I love the idea that you had this notion of, okay, well, this is the kind of thing I don't want to be doing, right? But then eventually someone kind of gives you a bit of a push and says, hey, I think you should try it. I think should be open to it. And that kind of, in a way, kind of speaks to what you had said before about like giving help, and like that person kind of recognizing that you need this, but I can't, like, you're not going to ask for it, you know? You're just going to be like, I think you just have to be in that kind of environment. And I think that's such a hallmark of a good mentor, a good sort of, role model. And so, going back to what you had said about your lesson being like asking for help, I personally struggle, I think, a little bit with asking for help. One, because sometimes I feel like I don't know what I don't know, and it's like, maybe I'll just try to figure it out on my own so I don't sound stupid. And the other is that I think I struggle a little bit with the idea of not being seen as independent, like, or capable, where I'll ask for help if it's something that makes my life a little bit easier, but something I could still do myself. And I'm wondering, in your experience, if this was part of your experience, how do you identify when you need to ask for help broadly?
Good question. I truly was at a point where I could not continue. Like,
Okay.
I was reading and nothing was making sense to me. Again, I had all these questions, like literally a laundry list of questions. And I knew, one, I was nearing kind of they say PhD takes 4 years. I don't believe that. But I was really coming close to my 4 years, and I'm
Yeah.
starting something new.
Yes.
My funding's running out. I
It's
there were
an
a
important
lot of
part.
things, very important part. And so I realized that I truly could not go any further
Yeah.
without asking for help. And so I had to give myself a big ego check and
Yeah.
yeah, and seek what I didn't know.
And so it sounds like it took your back being placed against the wall a little bit to kind of be like, okay, I can't really figure this out myself. Who did you end up turning to?
My supervisor first,
Okay.
um, and he was one of the people who told me, like, he even put up his hands and said, like, I'm a quantitative researcher. I'm not pretending to be a qualitative researcher. We need to bring somebody else on.
Yeah.
So seeing him tell me that I had to seek help as
Yeah.
well was reassuring to me that, the feelings I was feeling were
Yeah.
on the right track.
Yeah. And I think it's good to see that in someone that you respect and someone who is kind of your mentor, to be like, it's okay to say I don't know and to kind of seek that elsewhere, right? And so who did you end up bringing on or talking to, I guess?
Yeah, so first I talked to the professor who taught that qualitative
Yeah.
class. And with her help, I was able to choose a methodology. And somehow the methodology was developed by somebody at UBC, and she's now a retired professor. So
Yeah.
I actually ended up emailing her, and I wasn't sure if she would reply. Obviously, she's retired now. I think she emailed back within the hour and was, I know, it's incredible.
What? I don't
Um,
get email back within the hour. I'm nobody.
Literally within the hour. And she was like, obviously, I'm retired now, but like, she gave me, I think, a list of 3 people that
Yeah.
could help me, that were familiar with the methodology I wanted to use, and
Mm.
one was in my department. And yeah.
Fantastic. Wow.
And he has been such a help to me. He is also really responsive on email. Like, I think I emailed him a draft of my results at like 5 p.m. last week, and he had revisions back by 7 p.m. I was like, okay, I didn't need it that fast, but like, bless you, thank you.
I just want to establish for our listeners that this is not only atypical, but like setting yourself, this is normalizing a behavior that should not be normalized. Okay. Keep your work at work, people.
Yeah,
But I'm
keep your
glad
work.
that it worked out for you.
It worked out for me, but I do always, yeah, say like, oh, I'd love like revisions back in like a couple weeks or something. And he's like, here you go. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. But yes, I don't want to normalize this behavior.
But no, it's really great that you end up finding the people who are able to, at the very least, in a way, be that gatekeeper and be like, okay, here's who you need to talk to, and that they
Yeah,
were at your university.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Out
very
of
lucky. And
curiosity, what
yeah,
was the methodology you ended up picking?
so it's called interpretive description, and it was developed by Dr. Sally Thorne. She was a professor in our nursing department.
Okay.
And so it has an interesting lens, that it takes both a clinician's expertise and what we know from the literature and blends it together,
Okay.
which I felt was important because I had spent like 4 years working with these participants.
Yeah.
And although it's a novel population, I felt reflexively as a researcher, I could bring a lot to the table and that could
Yeah.
help inform my research question.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. That's cool that like it was developed at UBC to be able to kind of have that expert there. So in a way, you said that sounds like the aspect that you were describing in your lesson of like giving help, right? Like you
Yeah.
had the people who were able to do that, but then you also mentioned that you wanted to be able to do that yourself. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I might take this in kind of a different direction as
Sure. Yeah.
well,
Please.
because that was like the academic form of help I've had.
Okay.
But through the university, I've also been seeking a lot of different help and have received a lot of different help. I wrote down some of the resources I've used. So, for example, I get a bus pass in my
Yeah.
university. I use that almost every day. I visited the financial aid office, the writing center. I get a reduced cost gym pass. I use the pool. One time I poured water all over my laptop. It broke. And so every day I had to go to the library and like, hello, can I borrow a laptop? And like,
Wow.
and that's just within the university. Outside of the university, I've used our public library system. I've used our community center. I took a 6-week ballet course. I had a low income pass in our bike share program. And so those are all examples of aid that
Yeah.
have helped me in this time, when I'm not earning a lot of money. Um, and I hope one day when I grow up and I get a real job and I make real money,
Become a
that
real person.
real adult,
Yeah.
that I can help contribute to these programs that have been instrumental during my
Hmm.
degree as well. So whether that be financially or volunteering with my time,
Yeah.
I hope that I can give back to these resources.
I remember services being very similar, both at Western and at Waterloo, where I did my undergrad, because I was very into bikes, just like you are, and it was helping out with sort of the bike co-op there and whatnot. But I also am curious as to how did you feel about accessing these services initially? Because for me, at least, I felt, I feel, felt. When I was younger, I felt a little bit of shame around kind of accessing some of this stuff because it was reflective, like, oh, well, I'm not the kind of person who is, I guess, well off or whatever. But I also don't want to necessarily signal that. And looking at it now, it's like, well, these services aren't just there because for like people who can't afford it, but also like they're meant to be there to support anyone who could benefit from it. And so I guess for you, how did you kind of bring yourself to be able to do that?
I think it was a multi-generational thing.
Yeah.
Um, for a little bit of backstory, I was born when my dad was doing his PhD, and PhD students don't make a lot of money. My mom essentially like emptied her savings account to put my dad through school. And
Wow.
so I, for the first few years of my life, grew up needing to use these resources.
Right.
So I remember my childhood like going to the library and doing all these free or low cost activities and seeing my dad graduate, gradually work his way up the ladder,
Yeah.
starting to become more financially stable and seeing my parents give back to their community through, again, whether it be finances or time or energy. I knew that was something that I wanted to do as well.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that my parents recognized when they needed help and
Kind of
and
pass that
access.
lesson down.
Yeah, exactly. So even though, again, I hope one day I'll be getting a real paycheck but I know looking at my bank statements now, I'm not. Like again, I I still do a lot of things for free, but I think you can still have a really fulfilling life needing to access these services.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
It sounds like this is a lesson that really you kind of got to learn very early on, actually, you know? It's not something you had to put to practice maybe until, more specifically your PhD in many ways, but it sounds like your parents brought you up with this lesson of like it's not only okay, but it's going to give you a more fulfilling life to be able to access these things that are offered.
yeah,
Yeah, I really
yeah,
like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm grateful for my parents for teaching me that. And again, I am lucky to have parents like in the academia system, so
Yeah.
they understood it. They passed it on to me. Um, and at the end of the day, like the resources are there for you to use them,
Yeah.
and they want people to use them, otherwise they go away. So I
Yeah.
want to support the people putting on these workshops, these community programs, and
Yeah.
spread the word about them
That's
so
actually
more
a
people can benefit.
such a fantastic point, actually. Like people, I, what was I gonna say? There's a thing. It's the whole like thing with muscles. I'm gonna bring this back to the whole like muscles and very clinical kinesiology stuff. It's like as you get older, particularly I think I read somewhere after the age of like 35, if you don't start keep using your muscles, they will atrophy. They will get smaller, they will stop working. And so they very much are a use it or lose it kind of thing. And the reason why your body kind of, I guess, does that is like, well, if you're not going to use them, then why are we going to keep putting energy and resources into giving you them, right? Into
Yeah,
sustaining them? Because it is expensive to have muscle. It's expensive to have, a very healthy body in a way. And I think the same way what you're describing is it is expensive in a way, expensive. It costs resources to be able to hold these programs, to be able to offer them. And if there isn't that demand, if people aren't going to use them, then it's really hard to justify that, right? And I think that
totally.
for people like yourself who ultimately want to be able to contribute back to these things, if people don't use them, you may not have the opportunity to because they just won't
Yes,
exist, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's I love showing up for things that we care about.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's really powerful to see community come together like
Yeah.
that and support things, and I think it's so important.
So then we're already alluding to it a little bit, but let me ask you then, how does someone learn the lesson of asking for help, seeking help and then receiving it and then maybe even giving back without having to do a PhD or be born to someone who's doing a PhD? Because that's also, it's in your blood to just be a poor academic. You know what I mean?
Truly, yeah, yeah, yeah. I knew what I was getting
Like,
into far. It wasn't like a shock, although it was a little bit of a shock. I remember getting like my first paycheck and I called my parents and I'm like, I'm poor. And they're like, yeah, duh.
yes.
Yes, this is what you signed up for.
Yeah.
Um, I would say, like, although the university provides a lot of resources, it also where you live
Yeah.
does. Like, look into your city programs, your town programs. I have relied a lot. Something I did with my friends recently is we got a Google sheet of all the random knickknacks that we own,
Oh,
and we made it into like a gear swap kind of document.
okay.
So I'll explain more about that. But like my friend wanted to borrow my air mattress, and I was like, you totally can. And then I was like, wait, we probably all have stuff that we can lend each other that I use like
Right.
once or twice a year.
Yeah.
So we put it all in a Google Doc. Like we said, okay, Michaela has one tennis racket. My other friend has like
Yeah.
a tent. My other friend has like a sleeping pad. Anytime you want to borrow these things, just reach out. So even if your city doesn't provide them,
Yeah.
maybe you can. Maybe you can start
Right.
something to
Yeah.
help support each other and find that community.
What's that concept? It's mutual aid, right? Where you kind of like within your community of your neighbors, of just people that you can offer help. You can give, either that is labor or gear, like you had mentioned. Yeah. I love that.
Exactly. Because I think right now, like, I'm not in a great position where I can support things financially, but I can support them with my time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways to give back.
Yeah, emotionally for sure as well. It's in a way, I think everything we were discussing kind of draws back to this ethos of like it takes a village, right? Like even raising you, a child, the classic expression it takes a village to raise a child. Certainly it did for you. And then it takes a village, I guess, to raise a PhD student, right? Like clearly.
You write your acknowledgement section in your
Yeah.
dissertation. You really look back and realize you couldn't have done it alone. There's
Yeah.
just no way you can do it alone.
And I think it's
So don't do it
so,
alone.
yeah, and I think it's so symbolic that that section goes at the front. Before you get into like the meat of the PhD and the scientific stuff, it's like up front, this isn't possible without other people.
Truly.
Yeah,
Truly.
yeah, I love that lesson. Michaela, thank you so much for chatting with me today. It's been so nice to catch up, and I wish you all the best in finally finishing your PhD and coming out the other end,
Eventually.
and maybe becoming slightly less poor. I can't say that it's helped work for me, but maybe it'll work
Okay.
for you.
I'm really hoping, but I want to thank you because this podcast is a form of, taking your experiences and giving help to people
Oh, I
all
see. You're
over the
you're throwing
world.
it back at me. Okay, okay,
We're
I
throwing
see.
it back. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So grateful for people like you, again, offering the services that you have and the knowledge you have to pass it on to others.
Oh, well,
So thank
thank
you
you.
so much for that.
No problem. If you're interested in keeping up with Michaela, she posts frequently on her cycling adventures and many other things on her social media account at michaelas.happiness. And you can find it on Instagram, TikTok, and anything else?
That's it for now.
Instagram, TikTok, but you'll be expanding. After you're done your PhD, social media star. I just know it. All right,
I'll be
Michaela.
getting help from you.
I'll see about that. See if I have a job then or not, I still wait for that real adult paycheck too.
One day, one day.
One day. All right, Michaela. Thanks so much for chatting. We'll see
All
you.
right, thank you. Bye.